The reason I'm frustrated by the over-reliance, in my opinion, it's an over-reliance on upscalers, is that in some games it is magic. In a game like Cyberpunk 2077, you're able to do overdrive, like actual global illumination ray tracing with actual path tracing. It's insane. The difference in graphical quality is actually ridiculous, okay? And like, if you haven't seen a side-by-side, the quality difference is ridiculous. Like the level of detail in some of the lighting, especially in like nighttime scenes, are very, very noticeable. Much more realistic lighting, much more realistic shadows, all sorts of things. And DLSS with ray reconstruction and stuff like that allows for this to be done. And it makes one hell of a difference. It really does, especially when you're playing the game in motion. But you kind of need that. You kind of need that. Oh, look at this. Luke from a year ago. I mean, it's more than a year ago, I think. April of 23. We tried it and we turned on all the settings with all the like improved stuff. And like, look at this. It's outrageous. It's so pretty. Running in real time. And because of like DLSS, we're running this close to 100 frames a second. That's outrageous. Granted, this is like basically a supercomputer, but very, very impressive. So sometimes DLSS enables people to get wildly impressive performance with minimal image degradation. My frustration on the other side, on the console side especially, is that often it can turn into a crutch that devs use to avoid or justify not optimizing their games. I think maybe the best example of that would be like Jedi Survivor. If you don't remember Jedi Survivor, it was real gross at launch. Like really, really, really gross. I don't know if this is a good comparison, but some unbelievable artifacting with FSR2, which was the shipped upscaler they used. It just looked like garbage. Especially in motion, it just would ghost like crazy. Like his legs are ghosting like crazy. Just many, many issues with it. Compared to DLSS, way better, certainly. But basically, the devs were able to justify releasing the game in an unfinished state because they could render the game at like 500p and then try to upscale it to 1440 or 4K and just call it good and be like, close enough. It runs. Not great, but it runs. And they could bypass doing 6 months or a year of polish, which frankly the game needed back when it launched. And I think that this is only going to become a more common issue as budgets get tighter, as executives get more and more insistent on like these companies pushing out stuff like this faster and faster. And you can see that the PlayStation 5 Pro has been built around, well, PSSR is what they're calling it. We jokingly call it pisser, just like, you know, Digital Foundry guys also call it that because it set itself up. PSSR, it literally spells out pisser. I just choked on my own throat. Having said that, I think the more that it becomes mainstream and normal to upscale your games to hit performance targets, the more you're going to see studios putting games out that are frankly not ready. Because what it used to be is that your game needed to be at a certain level. Your game needed to be at this quality level in order to release. And then if you added DLSS, awesome, it can do that. But now it adds all of this performance. And so you get just greatly improved performance, but in addition to this base performance, because you optimize the crap out of your game, right? So it just added a big old chunk, and it's great. Nowadays, though, what it seems people are doing is that they're only optimizing the game to like here, and then the rest of the game relies on the upscalers to get it to where it frankly should be. So instead of just greatly improving the game above the minimum, they're relying on the upscaler to make it hit the minimum. And because upscalers are very impressive, you know, they're amazing pieces of technology and software, but because they have downsides and drawbacks, it's not a replacement for optimization. It just isn't. You get what I'm saying though, is that it feels like nowadays games are using upscalers to hit the minimum performance instead of hitting the minimum performance in terms of optimization and then using upscalers to make it even better. And that is the frustration for me, because if there is a shortcut available to companies to get games out faster and cheaper, they will use it. And occasionally, of course, there'll be exceptions to the rule. There'll be a game that just is like super, super well optimized, and that's great. Other times, though, they're just, and I would say the majority of times, most likely, you're going to end up with stuff like Jedi Survivor, where it's just not ready, but they put it out anyways because they're like, we'll fix it later, we'll polish it up later, but we can put it out now, save millions and millions and millions of dollars, and we're still hitting 60 frames or close to it because we're just using upscalers to get there. So I don't like the industry move towards upscalers. I didn't really like the industry's move and obsession with ray tracing because I just don't think it provides that crazy of a an improvement graphically compared to what can be achieved with like baked rasterized lighting or other things. There's some open world games, you know, where you have day-night cycles where it's not as simple as just we'll bake the lighting. It's like it's day-night cycle. You can't really do that. But I think the obsession with ray tracing came well before the hardware was ready for it. And you remember like the 20 series graphics cards on PC, those things were built around the promise of ray tracing. And even then, like frame rates were 30, 40 frames in most games. Like they were barely able to hit playable frame rates. And it looked a bit better, I guess, but it took like 5 years for them to get hardware and upscalers that could do that while still maintaining playable frame rates. So I think the ray tracing implementation and obsession of like the 2019, 2020 era affected this generation's consoles. And then I think it affected this generation's obsession with upscalers, and that's why we're in this spot that we are now. But also because AI is such a buzzword for corporations, if they say they have AI anything, people lose their minds. And so they can be like, oh, it's an AI powered and taught upscaler. And so investors just start chucking wads of cash at people. Yeah, it's a whole thing. I want better gameplay, not graphics. I want optimization. Like so many games have so much potential, but they're not optimized. They run like garbage. There's bugs. There's just so many things wrong with them for no reason at all. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. I just saw this. Anyway, so that's continuing the fallout from the PlayStation 5 Pro. People are very upset at the revelation that these cutting edge games are still relying on resolutions in the 800s and then upscaling from there. They look pretty good. The upscalers are pretty good. But again, it's just baffling that games are targeting internal resolutions that low in 2024. According to Mark Cerny, they said that roughly 75% of players care more about performance than visuals, and yet they still don't get the message that we're not obsessed with graphics like they think we are. Or at the very least, I think this generation has shown that when console players too get a taste of 60 frames per second, they really, really, really like it. And I think that that's caused an issue because a lot of these games were being built around 30 FPS targets, and a lot of engines were built around that target. A lot of physics sim was built around that target. A lot of the AI stuff was built around that target. So opening up the ceiling on that has caused more headaches than I think they anticipated. But at the very least, people have voted that with their wallets, in many cases, that they would rather have high quality ports that have good performance over just having the most bells and whistles graphically. Like I think even Jedi Survivor, I don't think you could even play that game without ray tracing on console at launch. I think ray tracing was enabled on all settings, which didn't make any sense because it just nuked performance. Yeah, I don't think the takeaway from that is 75% of people don't care about graphics. I think it's that 75% of people want 60 FPS. Yeah, I think that's fair, Lewis. I think a lot of people eat that up. Once they try 60, they're like, oh, I get it now. I see why PC gamers never shut up about 60 frames. It's because it's awesome. And then they chilled out. Who the hell is ray tracing? Dad joke. That's a good place to end it. That's a good one. Okay. He took my thing.